1, 0.
It's hard to watch something you love destroy itself, to see it fall apart. Disaster always feels so distant, detached. Someone else's struggle in some faraway place. It's not until it's in our city, at our doors, that we realize how fragile we are. All of us. All of this.
Greetings, fellow barbarians. It is I, Alan Odinson, and we are back again with the Barbarian Lounge podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us on your whatever day you may be listening to this. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to be doing a little series here on some different topics as it regards to prepping. But just real quick, let me get some info out so you guys can find us. Follow us on Facebook, the Barbarian Lounge podcast on Facebook. You can find us there to get all the different updates and stuff that we do. It's the best way to keep track of us. You can also check out our website at thebarbarianlounge.podbean.com. That's P-O-D-B as in boy, E-A-N.com. thebarbarianlounge.podbean.com. You can check us out there, see some of our past episodes. We're up to episode 4 now. We're keeping the content rolling. And that's what we're going to try and keep. We're going to try and keep them coming. You may see with this Prep Series 101 that we're doing, you may see some episodes come out earlier than Fridays and Saturdays. That's how I usually run these episodes. You're probably going to see some episodes popping up maybe midweek, because I really want to push out these Prepping 101 videos. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this. This isn't going to be some doomsday prepper thing. As you notice, I entitled this Part 1, How to Survive the End of Your World. Not the world, your world. And I'm going to talk about how we're going to differentiate the idea of the world versus your world. So we're going to split this up into different parts. This is Part 1. So, starting off, people may ask, okay, why should I prep? Why do I need to prep? Are you paranoid? Is that why you prep? No. Listen, people have been prepped. I remember when I was growing up, my grandmother always had a back room, a back storage room. You open that door and walk in there, and there were cans of food, extra toilet paper, you name it, Band-Aids, medicine, all these things were stocked in this back room. And it wasn't because my grandparents were paranoid. No, it's because that's what people did. These are the types of people who grew up during Depression eras and have seen economies fall and empires crumble, really. I mean, you know, we think back, that we start thinking about empires crumbling, you say to yourself, okay, well, Rome and, you know, all these different empires like that, but you don't have to go back very far. In my lifetime, we've seen the USSR crumble. We've seen it fall apart. And I remember, now granted I was a child at the time, so I think I may have been in either middle school or elementary school at the time. I don't particularly remember. But it was pretty much, you went to sleep, and you woke up the next morning and said, surprise, the USSR has collapsed. I'm sure maybe some adults already saw that coming, but I don't recall even in school hearing any rumblings of this. And we saw what happened to that area. I have some people whom I've spoken to who are from areas like Belarus, and you listen to some of them talk about some of the things that went on over there, and it can be quite shocking, even when you look at the genocides that happened over there with the Armenians. Just some crazy stuff that goes on whenever you see an empire crumble. So, we're not necessarily talking about the collapse of society here. that's one of the things, people get into this whole doomsday preppers thing, which, let me just go ahead and state this right off the bat. Doomsday preppers was something that was created to demonize the idea of prepping. It was designed to be a joke. That's why they find the most ridiculous people you could possibly... They either want them to look ridiculous, or they want them to look completely psychotic in their mindset. This is what they were looking for. Whenever they actually had a legit prepper group on there, those guys were cut. I know for a fact that James Yeager of Tactical Response, he was on Doomsday Preppers, and I mean, you want to talk about, I remember following some of the things they were doing, and you want to talk about having your shit together. His group, made up of some very skilled people, they got their episode cut because, honestly, they just looked too good. They didn't want it to appear as if this was something that was attainable for your average person. And that was always the idea behind these shows. They wanted to make it look silly. They wanted to make you seem paranoid if you were going to be a prepper, and they would create these scenarios that were way out of the realm of reality, and then throw these people in there, or they would have tons of money that you had to spend to do this, and everyone's like, well, I can't afford to prep. Well, let me tell you something, my friends. We're going to talk about today how you can afford to prep. I always take a common man approach to everything I do, and prepping is no different. And you don't have to have a giant storehouse and an underground bunker to be a quote-unquote prepper. It's almost prepper has almost become a derogatory term anymore. But it's not something that's out of your realm of reach. So we're going to cover that. Things that you can do. I mean, you can. It's a plethora of things. So let's go ahead and just divide this down a little bit. So I tend to take Prepping 101 and I knock it down into different subsections. Typically, it goes with 7 subsections underneath a Prepping 101 idea. Those 7 subsections are mindset. You remember I told you before you were going to hear mindset come up in a lot of different things, whether I'm talking about martial arts, combat archery, firearm, whatever. You're always going to hear mindset come up. Mindset plays an important role in everything you do, and we will talk about that. But number 1, mindset. Then we have gear. You have skills. Number 4, food/water. I put those together. You have number 5, shelter. Number 6, fire. Number 7, protection. Now, these aren't in any sort of particular order, so I don't really take the time to put them in order. If I had to put one at the top, it would be the first one I mentioned in mindset. So that's actually where we're going to start. We're going to start with mindset. The mindset of the prepper. No, it's not a paranoid tinfoil hat wearing type of individual. No. It's somebody who is keeping their eyes on the things that are going on around them. They're taking in their environment, the current society they're living in, their personal situation. See, people are under the assumption that when it comes to prepping, that it has to be a zombie apocalypse, or I've had people ask me that, and it's like the most insulting thing they can come up with. You know, are you prepared for the zombie apocalypse? Well, what type of zombies are you talking about? I'm not talking about undead zombies. I'm talking about the kind maybe wanting my food, but that's a different story. We'll talk about that later. But, you know, why am I going to prep? Well, why do you need to prep? Well, it could be a natural disaster. You see things, billboards up for FEMA saying, you know, have a go bag, have a plan. You see this thing. You know, take something like the San Andreas, San Andreas or the New Madrid fault line. That's New Madrid's closer to me. I'm sure some of you people out there on the West Coast are probably concerned about things like San Andreas. But you know, take the New Madrid fault line. The last time the New Madrid fault line went off, and we are due for something like that to happen. The last time something like that went off, it was felt all the way down the East Coast. And I think people don't really grasp the type of danger something like that could cause. You're talking about issues with the electrical grid. You're talking about issues with transportation, food, communications. All these things could be in jeopardy. So a natural disaster is a big deal. Take something like not long ago here in the South, in South Carolina particularly, we had what we jokingly called Floodmageddon, and it wasn't a hurricane, it was just an ass ton of rain. It rained and rained and rained, and no joke, it shut the state down because it was flooded so bad. And you had people who were not prepared for just this simple natural disaster that just came up. There was no warning. They just said, okay, we're going to get a lot of rain. No one expected flooding. These sorts of things can happen. You've got hurricanes. You've got all manner of things that can come through a natural type of disaster that could put you in the realm of having to be a prepper. You do not want to have to depend on government to save you. Look what happened with Hurricane Katrina. How well did FEMA do there? Yeah, think about that. There were people dying in stadiums as they round them up. They were going around taking people's guns. All these things were happening. People didn't have food. People didn't have water. I've seen it happen here just with the simple flood that we had. People had no idea what to do. You do not want to have to put your family, your people, and yourself in the hands of government to take care of you. It never turns out well. Trust me, history supports this. Now, granted, there will be a level where government's going to help infrastructure rebuild, but in the initial panic phase, you do not want to depend on government. If you can't remember anything else I say throughout this entire broadcast, remember that. You do not want to depend on government to protect you. So another level you could run into is a terrorist attack. Could be anything. It could be anything from a nuke, one of these backpack nukes. I mean, everyone knows the borders are wide the hell open right now. I mean, why worry about guys flying in? They can just walk across the border. Build a wall. I know that makes everybody paranoid, but you keep a front door on your house to keep out people that are unwanted unless you've managed to vet them. That's all we're asking, right? It's not something out of the realm of possibility to think about here. Also, there's a book out. I cannot remember the name of this book. I do know the name of the book. Can't remember the author. It's a book entitled Day of Wrath. And I think is it William Forsythe might be the author on that. I can't really remember, but look up Day of Wrath. And it's a very short read, and you see this massive terrorist attack on the United States and how it plays out. And it's not something that's out of the realm of possibility. It's basically small attacks, all coordinated, all throughout the U.S., ISIS attacking places like malls, schools, all on a small local level, like in my small town with our one traffic light that we have in our town. An attack somewhere like here, our officers would not be ready for something like that. So it discusses different ideas of things to be prepared for. It puts you in the situation of, wow, maybe I need to reevaluate the things I carry with me daily. Maybe I should leave that 6-shooter at home and carry my Glock 19 or with a full loadout and maybe a go bag in my vehicle. These are all sorts of things they ask you to think about. Another thing, an economic collapse. It does not take a genius to realize that the economy's in the shitter right now. Look around. The way that the out-of-control government spending right now is just mind-boggling. I know a lot of people don't like to keep track of economics, but these things are very possible at the moment. You've got the dollar slowly being devalued, and yes, it bounces up and down and all that, and we could go for hours about that, and people want to tell me that, the dollar's better than ever has been before. To those people, I ask you, if things were going bad, do you believe that the government would come out and say, you know what, the dollar's going in the shitter right now? Come on. Be realistic here. A lot of my friends that I've spoken to from Russia said, literally, that when the USSR went down, they went to sleep with money in the bank and woke up to nothing. Think about that. What if you woke up tomorrow morning and could not go to the ATM and grab some cash? What if the dollar was worth nothing? Think about these things. This is all I'm asking you. I'm not asking you to be paranoid. I'm asking you to think and view the world around you. If you're walking into, if you every time you go outside, you well, I hope you scan for threats, scan for things that may be out of place to get kind of an idea of the environment you're walking out into. If you hear noises, this is all I'm asking you. View the global environment right now. You owe that to yourself, you owe that to your family, you owe that to your people. So the idea of an economic collapse is very possible. Another thing that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to prepping is something on a smaller scale, such as a personal disaster. A personal disaster can be something as simple as, hey, honey, I lost my job today. Well, how are we going to eat? Well, I guess we're going to have to eat some of the food we have stored right now. Small things like this. A lot of people think that a prepper's mentality is for the big game. You know, when shit hits the fan, we yell Wolverines and we run to the mountains. That's not how it's going to go down in most cases. The most likely event you're going to have to prep for is a personal disaster. Something bad happened. It could be something as simple as the car broke down. Do you have other means prepared for something like that? Do you have money saved? Do you have things you can sell? Do you have? Are you invested in certain things, and can you pull money from that? Do you have another way to get to work? Your car breaks down where you're at. Have you thought about ways to get home? This is the things we're thinking about here. I know, like in my personal vehicle, I tell everybody, if I'm ever stranded beside the road, I'm going to be good for a while because I keep enough gear stored away in my truck, does not take up a lot of space, where I have shelter, I have fire, I have water, I have food, and I have means of protection. These are all things that I keep in my vehicle, in a bag. It does not take much. So you have to understand this idea of, and get out of this utter mainstream created psychosis of that, oh, you're paranoid if you're a prepper. It's absolute horseshit, and don't buy into it. The government is prepping all the time. They have massive seed vaults built into the sides of mountains, and all this other gear, weapons, all these things stored for what? Do they know something we don't know? I don't know. Maybe they're just prepping. You know, ants do it. So, I mean, maybe they're just taking the role of the human ant. I don't know. But things to think about. Another element of this mindset is to think about who you're with. Are you with your family? Are you with your tribe of brothers? Are you in a community? Are you in a massive community of people? Are you a loner? Are you by yourself? There are different paths that you need to take whenever, depending on who you're with. If you're a family man, if it's just you, your wife, and 2 kids, or whatever, where you're at, those are things you have to prepare for. What is the mindset that you're going to instill in them? Me and my wife, we always talk about plans. If anything were to happen, you know, we have certain protocols that we follow depending on who's away from the home, who isn't. There's always these things, certain communication protocols, travel protocols, all of these things we have ready, and we all have a go bag and can use everything that we have in the vehicle with us at the time. So these are the things we think about. Your tribe, who are your brothers, who's with you, who do you know that you can call on? Even if something is a small personal disaster, are you traveling to 3 states away and your car breaks down midway? Do you have people you can contact? Do you have people you can put your trust in? Are they down? Is their family down? Because a lot of people are under this assumption. I've had people, there's people that are friends of mine, or I would associate with, acquaintances. I always say I have very few friends, but many acquaintances. But some of these acquaintances of mine have said, well, if anything ever happens, I'll come to your house. And I'm like, I really wouldn't advise that. I really wouldn't advise that. I think I've heard Master Chim, Justin Garcia of the Pressure Project, I think he said, if you were not behind the wall the day before, don't expect to be allowed to come through the wall the day after. So, invaders get the arrow. That's the way I put it. So know the people you're with. If you're in a community, understand the community you're surrounded by. A lot of people live in neighborhoods, so you have people around you. Know those people. Know who they are. Make some contact with them. Develop alliances to people around you. This may prove vital in a bad situation. If you're going to be the loner, The loner needs to be a highly skilled, highly specialized position. It is not the ideal situation in the least bit. Everything becomes more difficult when you're by yourself. There's certain strategies you can use. We may do one of the series on the lone prepper, but I can tell you, I've always been the consummate loner, I guess you can say. But the older I've gotten and the more I've experienced things, the more important I see that making alliances and building connections is important. One of the things that I do, this is something the lone prepper can think about, is while I don't have a place that me and all my people can go, we have connections that expand for miles around where I'm at. And all these people are around me. And this allows me to make connections whenever, if anything were to go bad, I know I have friends to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south. Places I can go, and people who are specialized in certain things. While we're not together in a community, we're a group of loners spread out. So we're kind of a tribe that's spread very wide. Everybody under the radar, but we all know that we do have each other's backs if necessary. Now, the question becomes, when it comes to mindset also, what are you willing to do to live? What are you willing to do to survive? That's a big question. That's something you want to answer before anything happens. Because that's going to limit the decision-making process that you're going to have to go through once the shit has hit the proverbial fan. So go ahead and go ahead and work these scenarios out. When I was teaching firearms classes, it's one of the things, my CWP classes for the concealed weapons permits, I always presented these crazy scenarios to them. And I would say, if you're in a mall somewhere and you see a guy walking through there and he pulls out a gun and he starts shooting people, would you pull your gun to stop him? And everyone's like, yeah, hell yeah, absolutely. And I say, okay, same scenario, but instead of a guy, it's a 12-year-old kid. Would you still do it? And everybody's like, oh shit, man. These are things you need to think about. Because that's a viable scenario as well. These things can happen. We've seen many instances of, say, like terrorist attacks. We've seen ISIS employing children because people have this idea behind, it's a child, I cannot defend myself. Well, when I always look at it as if they're committing adult acts and they're taking adult lives, well, they've entered the big boy playing field. So get these things in your head. What are you willing to do? What am I willing to do to live? What am I willing to do to save my family? What am I willing to do to save my brothers? These are things you need to think about. Decide right now. Pause this broadcast right now and think to yourself, what am I willing to do? Run these scenarios in your head. This is the only way you're going to get better and get your mind in the correct place. Another thing to think about, where are you going to go? Instantly when I say this, I bet most of the people listening to this said, I'm going to run to the woods, the hills, or the mountains. And you're probably correct. That's going to be the more viable place to go. You have more food, more cover, concealment. It's a natural thing for human beings to say, run to the woods. But understand this. Everyone else will be thinking the exact same thing. So if you've got, say you've got a place set up, which we'll discuss shelter later, but just quickly, say you've got a place set up in the mountains somewhere. How long will it take before you start getting refugees from some of these cities that are going to go to shit? I assure you, of all the places you want to go, the city is not it. These places are going to go to shit really quick. All those people are going to start moving out to the wilderness area. And I can tell you, if those people grew up in cities or spent most of their life in cities, they're not going to be prepared. And they're probably going to want help. And most people are probably going to deny help to a certain extent. And then people are going to start to get desperate. Because then we go right back to what are you willing to do to live? You have to think about other people as well. When I tell you what are you willing to do to feed your family, when you're looking at your 3-year-old and they're starving to death, what are you willing to do so they live? You have to understand, that normal people who would not go to extreme points to survive certainly would be willing to do that for their family. So you could take a person who's a relatively good individual and turn them bad very, very quickly under the right circumstances. So understand where you're going to go. The woods, the hills, the mountain, man, these are good places to go. They're resource-rich environments. However, understand that everyone else will be going there as well. The city, like I said before, the city is a horrible place. You're going to want to be out of the city because typically, when I look at scenarios that have happened overseas and other places that have suffered collapse, you have your cities with these bubbles of gang activity in the middle, and they'll start absorbing all the resources like locusts, and slowly that circumference of taking that they're going to do is going to begin to spread, and you're going to have issues with gangs and stuff like that. Don't think that these gangs aren't prepping as well, but they're prepping different things. They're not prepping food, water, and things. They're prepping things like guns, ammunition, and body armor, which we'll be discussing that in a probably part 2. Your home. If you're going to stay home, understand your community, understand where you're at, and understand you're going to have to take many things into consideration if you're planning on staying home. For bug out, if you're wanting to bug out, the mindset to bug out, a lot of people have this idea that bugging out is you take all the shit you're ever going to use and you load it in a backpack and you run off into the woods. That's not the idea of a bug out. A bug out is you have a location. I'm trying to get from point A to point B. That's what a bug out is. It's not you're not carrying the last bag you'll ever carry on your back. A bug out is moving from point A to point B. A lot of people get all their gear, think about throwing it in a pack, and you end up with a 150-pound pack walking around with this, and it's absolutely ridiculous. If you're going to be bugging out from point A to point B, you need to already have your equipment and things cached at that point B location. So your bug out bag is going to be very, very specified to the journey that you're going to be making. So you need to know your path, you need to know your fitness level, and you need to know your gear. You need to get used to having all that with you. If you're thinking about this idea of a bug out type of scenario. Speaking of bug out, that moves us to our second category of gear. Now your gear is going to be dependent on a couple things. One of the things definitely that your gear becomes dependent on is your skill level. We'll be talking about skills later on. Your skill level, your location, and your plans. A lot of people get caught up in just having all this ridiculous gear, and they've never really put any of it to use. And they get this idea that, you know, they've got a winter clothing in there for summertime conditions and things like this. You need things that are universal, that are going to be specific to your location. The items that I'm going to carry here in the South are going to be different than the items someone in, say, Wyoming or Alaska or Canada or any place like that is going to carry on them. So you need to think about this sort of thing. If you have multiple locations, as I talked about with bugging out, if you have multiple locations, you need to start caching supplies in that secondary location. That could be a cabin. It could be a bug out location in the middle of the woods at a certain point where you're going to meet up with your people. Start caching things there, or even if you want to take it a little further, maybe along the way. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of caching your equipment. There are things you can find on that, but I will tell you this, coming from a prepper family, for those of you who don't know, my father and the like, we went back in the 90s, we were big in that militia movement, and it wasn't this silly bullshit you see. He was big in the militia thing, and he's passed on now, so all you feds can't go after him. But he was big in the militia thing, and he used to cache shit all the time, and big PVC with the oxygen absorbers in there, and man, he cached some shit. Let me just tell you, I may or may not know the location of some of that stuff, but I'll just leave it at that. So multi-locations, if you're going to have multi-locations, you need to cache things along the way, depending on what you're going to have. So what should you have? Well, let's talk about some essentials. If you're naturally, you're going to need a backpack. And there's tons of different backpacks you can have out there. From an affordability standpoint, you can't really beat an Alice pack. They're not the most comfortable. There are some backpacks that are like the Rolls Royce of backpacks out there, and you'll spend a lot of money on them. But if we're thinking affordable, if we're thinking a common man's approach, Alice pack's a pretty decent way to go. Large duffels and stuff, you have to think about carrying these things long ways. And I always advise people, if you're going to get a backpack, you need to load that shit up with your maybe 40, 50 pounds or more, depending on what you're going to be carrying in your bug-out bag, or whatever bug-out backpack you're going to have or backpack you're going to carry around. You need to load that shit up and hike with it in all kind of different terrains and get used to it. You'll start to realize what you want to carry and what you don't want to carry. Another one of the essentials you're going to need is water storage and purification. Always want to have a means of carrying water. I'm not a big fan of your plastic bottles. I like to use a metal bottle. The reason being for that is I can get some shitty water in that metal bottle, put it right over the fire, and boil it right then. So you can get stuff like that. Water purification, you can get tablets. Right now, if you want to talk a approach that everyone should look into, you can go to places like, I know Academy Sports was carrying them. They probably still are because I picked up several of them. Get a life straw. You can just take this thing and hop right down in the water and drink through it like you're drinking a straw in a glass of water. You can drink right out of some nasty, crusty water, and it'll filter out all that stuff. So you don't have. It's perfect for a bug-out bag because you can be moving and just stop, get some water, and keep going out of the nastiest fucking water you'll ever see in your life. These things are widely used in places like Africa and other places where the water is just bad. Life straws are just that. They are a lifesaver. They're very small, very lightweight, and I highly recommend them. Another essential, weaponry and protection. That goes without saying, and we'll get a little bit more into that later on, but remember, weaponry and protection. Food. You're going to need food. It's going to be dependent upon where you're at, where you're staying, how you're traveling. You are going to need a certain level of food. You're also going to need medical. Medical's vitally important. We'll talk a little bit about medical later. If you've got a group, another thing that I cannot suggest enough, if you have a group of people or people you're going to meet up with, have comms. Some sort of comms unit, some way to communicate with each other. Test these things out. They always used to say that the context of old battles, like in the Civil War, something as simple as a pair of walkie-talkies could have changed the entire outcome of several battles. So for your bug-out bag, everyone's always asking me, I always get this common question, what should I put in my bug-out bag? I cannot answer that for you. The reason being is that everybody's bug-out bag is going to be different depending on what they're doing, where they're going, what their particular skill set is. First off, if you're going to have a bug-out bag, decide on a plan. What are you going to do? Where am I going? What type of terrain am I going to be in? Am I going to encounter resistance along the way? How much ammo can I carry comfortably? All of these things become a big deal. So you need to have that plan decided before you even think about that. But just some basic things that you're always going to need. A shelter. A shelter is definitely something you're going to need. You can build a shelter along the way, but understand, if we're thinking about the idea of escape and evasion here, and we want to keep as low a profile as we possibly can during such a bug-out situation, if you start disturbing the environment around you to build a shelter, you're going to leave traces to other people who've come through there, or if you're being tracked, you're going to leave traces for people to find you along the way. So if you can carry some sort of shelter with you, a small pup tent, something as simple, an easy solution would just be a garbage bag. Several large those massive yard trash bags. Carry several of those. They're very small, take up little space, and you could use it as a makeshift shelter. A large military poncho or some sort of tarp will provide this as well. You can get very small tents that you can use. If you got the bright colored tents, also carry something. I have a small bright colored tent, but I also carry a olive green tarp. That once I pop that tin, I can put that olive green tarp over it, cover it up, and it blends right into its surroundings. So consider that with a shelter. With your water, again, Life Straw is a perfect example of something to have. If you want to be able to carry water with you, as I said before, make sure you've got, I like to have a metal bottle. That's just personal preference. If you want to use a plastic bottle, go ahead, have at it. Some sort of weaponry with the bug out bag. We'll discuss types of weaponry that you're going to have in the protection section. But you want to have a little bit of food in there. I like to have little energy things to keep me going, because you have to think. You're trying to get from point A to point B. So you want to keep moving. So keep things that are going to be high calorie. They're going to have plenty of vitamins, stuff that keep you moving. Power bars. That's a good call in there. Some small things like peanuts, just things to keep you moving. You also want to have medical in there, Band-Aids, tourniquet. We'll talk about that stuff later. If you're thinking about your gear for a home or a secondary location, naturally in these areas you can have larger quantities of these things because you're not moving. So you could have a room set up specifically in your house. This is where we store all of our stuff. But understand this, when you're thinking of a home or a secondary location, you need to discuss the idea of how you want to have that location presented to the outside world. I'll expand on this a bit. The idea is, do you want your home or secondary location to be an overt? What do I mean by this? A covert means, basically what I'm saying is, do you want people to know you're there or not know you're there? Very simple. So, if I'm trying to have a covert location, that means that anybody that's walking by my house, I don't want them to know I'm here. I want it to look run down. It could be something as simple as the grass growing up, busting out a few windows. I've heard some theories of people who have, if you've got cans of spray paint, you can make your house almost look burnt out in a way. Blacking out the windows. That's going to be important, especially if you're using light inside. If you've ever been someplace where the power's out or it's pitch black, the people with candles and the people with flashlights in their house, it's like a beacon. You can see right where they're at. It's the same for people with generators. I've been in massive power outages, and I can tell you every single person within like a 2-mile radius that's got a generator, because you can hear them running. That's going to be a signal to people around you. So if you're going to be covert, you want as least an impression on the outside world as you can be. You want your house to look empty. If you're going with an overt, well, you want to have a show of force. This is where you've got 2x4s set up in the front yard with barbed wire, and you've got things set up funneling people in certain directions. You've got guards. I mean, you want it to look like this is not the place you want to fuck with. You want to go to the house down the road. This also makes you a target. If you're going to have an overt sort of impression on the world, you need to have the people to back it up. There's a certain level of skills and people that you need to have around you to really enforce that overt. If you're a father and you've got a wife and 2 small children, and they're not prepared for the fight, you may want to choose a covert path. Even though the man in you wants to fight, you need to start thinking about can I really stop a street gang of 10 people that want to come in my house? Yeah, we all want to be macho, but you have to really think about these things. So these are things you need to think about with your gear. So now our next subsection is skills. And these skills can be divided up into smaller sections of 4. We usually have these as survival, medical, fighting, and fitness. For survival, this is another thing regarding the idea of the bug out bag. For survival, the more skills you have means the less gear you're going to need. If I have the ability to start fires with minimal amount of gear, and I have the ability to survive in general, obtaining water, building shelter, the more skills I have in more primitive skills, the less gear I will need. So for me, personally, if you see my bug out bag, or what I would consider my bug out bag, or even an overnight bag where I'm camping in the woods, you're going to see basically a small bedroll. It's going to look like a hobo pack almost. It's a small bedroll that fits right about the small of my back. That's everything I need to get from a point A to point B type situation, or spend a night or two in the woods. That's everything I need, all rolled up into one. It's because I have a certain level of skills in the areas that I need to help me, a certain level of primitive skills, to help me survive with less gear. Someone who does not, well, you know, I can tell you that you can get some nasty water, tell you how to filter it, tell you how to boil it, and all of these things, or I can tell you to get a life straw. So, the more skills you acquire, less gear you need. The good thing about this, if you're talking about having to bug out from a point A to point B in a hostile location, alright, now that skill set, that survival skill set, becomes greatly important, not because you're going to have to survive, but because you can carry less gear, meaning you can carry more of other things you may need, such as ammunition. So I can take all that extra shit out of my pack and throw a couple ammo cans back there, and now I'm carrying some sufficient weaponry on me. That's one of the biggest things with carrying. A lot of people get this idea of bugging out, and they're like, yeah, I got 10,000 rounds saved up. And I'm like, well, if your plan is to bug out, you're going to have to leave most of that unless you're caching it. Because you're not, I don't know if you've ever carried even just 200 rounds of 7.62 through the woods in your pack, but that gets heavy. So, having more skills opens the door to carry more of something else. And you have to assess things like, can I get food? Can I build shelter? Can I get water? All of these things start becoming important. So if something happens, maybe you've got your bag on you and you set it down, you got to do something. Well, on your way back, you notice that somebody's there and they're looting your bag, and it's maybe 5 people. It's just you, and they're heavily armed. You may have to move on and leave your shit. Can you survive without that? That's one of the reasons I haven't really spoke about this in gear, but I like to employ, like, I have a large bag that carries most of my a lot of my heavy shit, and I also have a small pack that I can also carry around my waist, so when I need to scout, I can drop that heavy bag and just walk with that small bag. Well, the good thing about that small bag is it's got everything I need in it as well. So if I do for some reason have to lose my big bag, well, then I still have that minimal gear for the skill set that I currently have. So the other thing was medical, and you need to be able to treat major as well as minor wounds. For the most part, I mean, there's some things you're not going to be able to do. This is another reason why it's important for your group especially to have somebody, even if it's just you and you've got a group spread out. In my group, I have several doctors, people who are in the medical field. I have a dentist. I have some chiropractors who have also studied many medical things. I have a lot of holistic healers. These are all people that I have in my network, that network of friends that I have out there. All these people can help you along the way. You may need them to do something. The idea of getting injured, it's very possible. And some sort of injury like that, you need to have someone there who can handle such a situation. Fighting. You need to seek some sort of training, some sort of martial arts training. But that doesn't just mean hand-to-hand fighting. It also means the ability to use firearms, even blades. Seek these things out. I mean, you need to find a style, though, that's going to suit your goal. Don't go someplace and train to do competition fighting when the reality is you're probably going to be fighting in no-rules types of situations to where horrible things can happen, weapons come into play. But at the same time, I also urge you not to take some bullshit martial art as well just because it calls itself a reality-based style. But a lot of people, when I speak of fighting, I think about firearms, they're like, well, I can shoot. I've been shooting my whole life. That's not what I mean. I mean, you need to seek training from qualified instructors to teach you to fight with a handgun, to fight with a rifle, that puts you in that mindset of a fighter, the martial arts of firearms. If you want to argue the original martial art of the United States of America, it was gunfighting. I tell everybody that. Does the United States have a martial art? Yeah, it was gunfighting. We were the first people to have gunfighters. So they're modern day people who would fall into the category of gunfighters. I'm not talking your tactical, awesome dudes out there who, you know, they got all the logos and everything on them. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual fighters with handguns and other weapons. Seek those people out. There's a lot of good martial arts schools out there that are teaching blade work, realistic blade work. Find these people. Fitness. Fitness is massive. I'm going to tell you, talking about Doomsday Preppers again, I hate to even bring this shit up, but it's a perfect example. I remember on one of the episodes, may have been the first episode, they had this guy who was so fat he could barely walk. And he's rolling around on a electrical scooter, and he's carrying a gun, a rifle in there, and talking about how he's going to defend his land and defend his family. Dude, the only thing you're defending against is not dying tomorrow from heart disease. You have to have some sort of level of fitness. And I'm not telling you to be a marathon runner. I'm not telling you to be a power lifter or a CrossFitter or anything like that. I'm telling you to have a basic level of fitness to be able to throw a 70-pound pack, if you must, on your back and carry it for 6-7+ miles. These are things you have to think about. There's a certain level of strength you need to have. You don't have to be a power lifter, but if you can't do 50 push-ups, there's a problem, my friend, a big problem. So, you also have to think about, can you run? Oh, I don't want to run. That's why I carry guns. Now, there's going to be instances where you're going to have to make a retreat, or you're going to have to move from point A to point B. How well can you fight once you reach that point? If we're separated from a group and shit goes down, and I hear gunfire, and I need to get from point A to point B, that just may be, a half mile away, and I'm on foot, okay, I can make it there in a quick amount of time, but how well will my conditioning level be that I can still fight efficiently when I get there? You don't need to die of a heart attack halfway there, or when you get there, you're breathing so heavy your sights are bouncing up and down on your rifle. These are things you have to think about. Can you perform under stress? And this is where the cardiovascular work will help on that. Your health is going to be vitally important. The better shape you're in when something bad happens, the better off you're going to be. So this moves us to our fourth spot. I think that's number 4. Yeah, and our fourth spot, our fourth subsection, is food and water. Now for food, when it comes to storable food, there's a lot of different ways out there. You can go with canned, you can go with the dehydrated. Renewable food is an important thing. Have some sort of self-sustaining food. The ability to, maybe you've got some chickens, or you know somebody that has some chickens. This is important for your network. Can you process food if you have to? If you have to kill a squirrel to feed your family that night or whatever, can you do that? There's a lot of good stuff out there. eFoods Direct has some good stuff. There's so many things out there. The canned food is the most affordable way to do it, and you have to rotate this. You can't just take it. Although I have had some canned food that's several years old, past its expiration date, and it still tasted fine. Usually, as long as the can is not, the integrity of the can is not messed up where your seals are broken, usually it stays good without any issue. But the canned food is an excellent choice. You can go to some place like a Dollar General or a Dollar Tree, or even like a Walmart, and get small cans of food for under $1 each. Each week, just go and buy set $20 aside out of your weekly budget, and buy $20 worth of canned foods and put it back to storage. Do this each week, and you slowly start to build a supply up. For bug out food, as I talked about, you got your energy type foods and all these different things. One of the things I always include in my bug out gear is a can of ravioli. And I'll tell you why. A can of ravioli is very, very versatile when it comes to a survival food. You've got your carbs, you've got your proteins in there, but you pop that can open, and you do not need a can opener. There are techniques to open it. If you can open a can, no problem with just using the sidewalk if you have to. Very simple to do. We actually broke our home can opener, and we were opening cans here using the scraping method that you use, the circular scrape method. But a can of ravioli, you take that thing, you pop the top off, right? You pull the label off of it, so you just got your can, your ravioli sitting inside. Now you can eat it cold. Let me tell you, cold ravioli, man, that's the way to go, right? I love some cold ravioli. But say you want to heat it up. You can take that can and put it right over the fire and cook it right in the can. You can even, if you need to build your fire, you can take the label and use it as a tinder to start your fire. You can pull the lid off of the can, and now you have a cutting surface if you need to. So a can of ravioli is very, very versatile in many different ways. You can use it as you can use the cans as hobo stoves. There's all kinds of different things you can do with a can. That's why I always recommend canned goods. Plus, you can get very filling whole foods in that as well. Some other cheap solutions for your home storage. Some people get into using the Mylar bags and getting bulk things of rice and everything. Let me tell you this. I like small things, small cans, small bags of rice. And the reason being, if you've got this gigantic thing of rice that you've got stored in a Mylar bag, and it's like a gallon of rice or a gallon of beans, once you pop that open, it's open. And now you need to use that. That stuff's on a time limit. If I have smaller cans or smaller bags of things, now I'm opening just single servings, so I'm not wasting anything or running the chance of wasting any sort of food that I have. But some other cheap solutions, especially small solutions. Hey, who hasn't eaten ramen noodles, right? It's probably one of the more horrible foods you can have. But as far as a quick carb, something very, very, very cheap, ramen noodles is a good way to go. If you store some different sauces, some Alfredo sauces, spaghetti sauces, and stuff, you can actually get pretty gourmetish with it. Get some canned chicken, some canned tuna, and man, you can mix that shit up pretty good. I usually take them and we'll throw the little seasoning package away and mix it with something else. And like I said, yeah, it's GMO, and yeah, it's horrible for you, but in a bug-out situation, who gives a shit? You may be eating a fucking rat before it's all said and done with, so have some ramen noodles. Maybe the GMO will actually genetically alter you into the Hulk or something like that, and you'll be doing great then. But you want to have things like that. Soups, all these different things are great. Condiments. Man, every time you go to a fast food restaurant, ask for ketchup, ask for salt, ask for pepper. Take that and store it. You're going to have to rotate this because it will go bad. Not necessarily the salt and pepper, but the ketchup, the mayonnaise, the sauces. You put all these things back, you'd be amazed having some salt and pepper and maybe some ketchup, how that might prevent you from having to kill somebody one day because you're sick of eating bland food. These are certain psychological aspects that come into survival and prepping that a lot of people don't think about. The psychological impact that's going to hit you. And as I said before, make sure you're rotating your foods. If you're storing at home, you got to rotate those things out. If you get the correct foods, you're not going to run into the need to rotate it out as much. So, but just consider that. Some of the storable foods, the eFoods Direct and everything, some of that shit will last for like 20 years. So, it's pretty, and it's very tasty. Some of that stuff is horrible, but of course you got MREs and everything, but everybody knows MREs taste like shit. But if you have to live off of it, like Crocodile Dundee says, you can live off of it, but it tastes like shit. So, just consider that. So, storing water. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. You can, of course, buy big things of bottled water. You can do that. I would probably suggest keeping it in a cooler place rather than a hotter place because you start getting some of those chemicals leaking into the water. Granted, if you have to use it in a bug-out type situation, it's not going to matter because it's going to be water. Another thing, I know some people that have rain barrels. stuff like that, you are going to still need to treat that water. But you can use rain barrels and other collection, water collection things. However, check your local ordinances, because in some places, I know that sounds crazy, it is illegal to collect rainwater. Yes, that's right. You heard me correct, folks. Type it into Google. I just saw a thing where a guy was sentenced to prison for collecting rainwater. That is the insanity of the world we are living in right now. If you do have to purify your water, of course there's the filtering process, but the things you're really worried about, especially if you're talking like bug out situations, or if you're in the woods or whatever, you worry about things like giardia. And you get that, you're gonna get very sick, diarrhea, and you're gonna dehydrate incredibly quickly. So things you can do: one, your life straw. Again, man, if you haven't made up your mind by now to buy a life straw, there's not really much else I can do for you. But if you're going to boil your water, there's certain things you need to think about for that. Now, this is where having something to boil water in becomes greatly important. But this is also another reason why fire is so important, which we'll talk about that later. But if you're going to boil, a lot of people ask, okay, how do I, how long do I boil? What temperature do I boil? Typically, you want, if you're going to get your water up to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to need to boil it for about 30 minutes. So, well, you have to think, once you get it hot, you're going to have to bring it right back down to cool it before you can drink it. If you get it up to right around 180, 185 degrees Fahrenheit, you only need to boil it for about 3 minutes. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're boiling water way too long, because now you're starting to waste resources. So if you let it get up to, and if you're not comfortable with 3 minutes, bring it down, do it another 2 minutes, let it go 5. Too much is probably going to be better than too little. But you may say to yourself, well, hell, how do I know when it gets that hot? There's another thing you might want to include in your gear, is a small thermometer that you can measure the temperature of your water. It doesn't take up much space. They have some that are very durable, and you can put that in your bag, your go bag. Have several of them. Have one for your house, have one for your go bag. So if you do have to boil water, there you go. You have the ability to see exactly what temperature your water is getting to, so you don't run the risk of drinking anything bad. So our, what are we up to now? We're up to our fifth one. Our fifth one is shelter. This isn't a very vast topic as far as shelter goes. There's a lot of different shelters out there. I do want to address bunkers. A lot of people think about these underground bunkers and things like that. Let me tell you something. How long do you think you can live underground and not go completely and utterly insane? When we do our episode on the dark side of prepping, yes, there is a dark side. When we do our episode on the dark side of prepping, we'll talk about some of the horrible things that can happen to you if you are in a bunker. So if you're thinking about, well, I'm just going to get a bunker, go ahead and start planning something else, because that's not the best idea at all. If you're going to stay home, again, I talked about before with home, I got some people some friends of mine who, it's just them. They live by themselves, and they're under the impression they're going to defend their home. And I tell them, they're like, well, I can fight. And I'm like, well, how many corners of your house can you defend at once? For one. For two, if I need to get you out, I'm probably going to sit back with my bow with some flaming arrows from behind cover, and I'm just going to set your house on fire from a distance, and I'll burn it and wait for you to come out. So this goes to the dark side of prepping, right? Another thing, you've got your tents, of course. I've talked to you about tents, and, of course, primitive shelters. Primitive shelters are good. They have some very covert ones. I love a spider shelter. That's one of my favorite types of primitive shelters. And you can blend right into your surroundings, but understand that you will be leaving an impression that you have been there. Alright guys, due to time constraints, we had to cut this episode a little short, but the talk continues. If you would like to hear the rest of the talk, please download at our website.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and I am the